Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unscripted Plus. My name is Sasha Hausman, and I'm the Director of Development at the Van Wezel Foundation. And tonight, you'll be experiencing art from the inside out, directly from our artist living room directly into yours. So tonight, here are the living room rules. We hope you've come as you are. There's no need to worry about how you're looking in the Zoom screen. You can see us, but we cannot see you. And I hope you've brought something to write with and write on because you'll need that throughout the evening. And if you forgot, don't worry, go ahead and grab that right now. And tonight, you'll help us write the script by participating in Zoom polls, commenting, asking questions, and sharing in the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So let's go ahead and practice now. Please comment with your name and where you're Zooming from right now. And be sure to include all panelists and attendees so everyone can see. And if you're having technical difficulties or have general unscripted questions, feel free to chat directly to me, Sasha, and I'll serve as your moderator throughout the chat room throughout the evening. And finally, there's no need to unmute yourself or share your video. Just relax and be a part of the experience. We're so glad you're here. And now I'd like to introduce your host for the evening, Cheryl Mendelson, CEO of the Van Wezel Foundation, and Patricia Caswell, co-founder and program director at the Hermitage Artist Retreat.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Van Wezel Foundation and the Hermitage Artist Retreat, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our community edition of Unscripted, Arts from the Inside Out. The collaboration for Unscripted grew from a shared vision that great art doesn't begin out in front of an audience. It begins in the private spaces where we dream and we create. In preparing for tonight, I came across a quote from Eric Booth, where he says, "The work of art lives in the experience, the journey within the process." That truly defines the spirit of Unscripted. Tonight, we welcome over 150 guests, including art supporters, civic and community leaders, educators, and teaching artists. It's a wonderful testament to the importance of arts education and integration in our community. It's my pleasure to now turn it over to Patricia to introduce tonight's program.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm Patricia Caswell, the co-founder of the Hermitage Artist Retreat and its program director, and a fan of Eric Booth. Eric has had about 6 successful careers. He acted on Broadway. He could have stayed in theater, delighting people with Shakespeare. He could have stayed in his career in trend analysis and research. He could have remained a television pundit, doling out insights to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. He could have stayed in a comfortable room, adding more books to the 7 that he wrote and published. One was a bestseller, and now there's Tending the Perennials. By the way, all of those Post-its in the end there, each one of those pages has stunning insights. But he didn't stay just in his room. He could have remained in the ivory tower of academia, where he spent decades at Juilliard and Stanford and Tanglewood and Lincoln Center and Kennedy Center. But it seems that in the arc of his career, he made it to the summit of several fields, and he wanted to do something more difficult, more challenging. He took on the challenge of becoming the professional champion for arts education and teaching artists. They're an important part of the arts ecosystem that often gets a little less spotlight or applause than the other parts of the arts ecosystem. As arts education champion, His wisdom has been tapped for keynote speeches for UNESCO and for governments on several continents. He's a senior advisor for El Sistema, a music system that is changing young lives worldwide. He's a consultant for 7 of the leading orchestras in America. He received the most prestigious prize that you can receive in the United States for arts education from Americans for the Arts. And he is our very own Hermitage curator. As such, he recommends nationally respected teaching artists to come for residencies at the Hermitage. They work there, they write there, they think there. And while they're there, we ask each teaching artist to do a presentation in the community, usually a master class or in-service for teachers or professional development. And this is at no charge to the school board. About every year, Eric will give us 10 teaching artists to share with the people and students of Sarasota. Aren't we lucky to have Eric? And aren't the students of Sarasota County lucky? And now you're lucky. You get to experience this legendary yet humble human, Eric Booth.
Wow, Patricia, that was way too nice. Thank you so much. And thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, people who've joined us. Haven't we gotten good at Zoom in these last months? You'll notice I may be in the studio in my house, but out of sheer envy, that's the Hermitage behind me, wishing I were there, just a little gesture of envy for what I feel every single day from my home here in the Hudson River Valley. It's a treat to have some time with you. And just before we dig in, a couple of words of acknowledgement of a long history I have with the Sarasota area. Many trips down there to visit my grandparents in Venice, coming home with buckets of shark's teeth. And 3 different times I've been able to travel and work with the Van Wezel education program over the years. And as Patricia was mentioning, a long, loving relationship with the Hermitage Artist Retreat, where I get to be an artist myself and I get to support their focus on teaching artistry. And I even get to be a financial donor. And when someone in arts education is a financial donor, you know that's serious. You may not know, those of you in the Sarasota area, just how distinguished an arts education ecosystem you're living in. I mean, the Van Wezel, where I've been able to work some, they work with, through the foundation, with 35,000 kids a year in your area. And in the pandemic, some extra donors stepped up and that number has even increased during the pandemic time. And I've been able to be connected with the Any Given Child initiative that is a collective endeavor to raise more arts education, and the Sarasota Arts Education Partnership. You have a lot of institutions in the area creating an unusually rich arts education ecosystem for kids. I hope you're sufficiently proud of what you've created. And I'll just mention one more thing in delighted praise of the Hermitage. You may not realize it, but their commitment to supporting teaching artists that Patricia was mentioning, it is not only unusual, I think it's unprecedented in all the world for an artist retreat to make such a distinctive commitment to supporting the work of teaching artists. The only one in the world that actually creates distinctive residencies to support that part of our arts ecosystem. So thanks to them. And tonight we're going to look at teaching artistry just a bit, this overlooked part of the arts ecosystem that is, as Unscripted is all about, taking a look at the inside. So what we're going to do in this chunk of time, we're going to do a little poll, a couple of polls for you to participate in quickly. And then we're going to have an arts activity that actually tests out whether this teaching artist thing actually makes a lick of difference. Then I want to share a few key ideas about teaching artistry, and then we'll have time for some questions and answers. So you can throw those in the chat box. I still haven't gotten very good at being able to talk and read at the same time. So Andy Sandberg from the Hermitage is going to help facilitate that conversation when we get to it. So let's start by introducing some of these topics with some polls to see how our participants stand. So if we could bring up that first poll, and everyone get your poll voting finger. We're all getting ready with polls these days. There's the first poll. What percentage of Americans do you think identify as arts people? In the US, I call them the Arts Club. What percentage of Americans do you think identify themselves as arts people in the Arts Club? Give it a quick vote for what percentage you have a hunch. And I'm going to give you about 15 more seconds to vote. I see a vote over there in the chat box at 25%, and the rest of you can vote right into that poll script. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And EJ, let's see some answers. 43% is the predominant guess, although we have, let's see, almost, yeah, we have 2/3 think it is a quarter of Americans or more. Well, here's the answer from psychographic research done in the US and in the UK. It is 6%. 6% of Americans identify themselves as people of the arts. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, there's a lot more than 6% go to the Van Wezel and arts places all over. They go visit the Arts Club. But people who identify in the Arts Club, they can do different things. They can go to a weird work of art and know how to find their way into it. They can understand what's happening over there in the Hermitage. So there is 6% who are the insiders and 94% that have some distanced relationship to the arts. And that's part of why we need teaching artists. They are the designated workforce for bringing people in. Let's go to that second poll that's a little less blunt in its demand. And this one asks, do you have a sense of what a teaching artist is? Let's see what our base of awareness is in this group. And you can tell the truth. It's anonymous. No one will raise their eyebrows and give you a funny look if you don't know what we're talking about here. Never heard of them, know a little bit, kind of sure. Get out of my face. I am a teaching artist. Which is the one for you? And we'll give it a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everybody's voted. All right, EJ. Oh, we got a serious teaching artist crowd here. We got, look at that. 80% are pretty sure or in the game. So I'm going to be speaking to the converted, to the choir. The choir can do with a little preaching every now and again. And for those who are a little less familiar, this one's for you. Let's go to that third poll. And this is to get another sense of who's with us tonight. And this one wants to know, pure and simple, are you an artist? That brings up the question of how do you define artist? Let's see what your first impulse answer is. And what do you think the answers are going to be here? The people who are drawn to an unscripted evening. We could have a betting, a little betting on the side. And let's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And who's in the room? We got a lot of professionals. We got a pretty good showing of amateurs here. A quarter of our attendees are amateur artists, but nudging half are professional artists. Beautiful. And our last question is going to be about one of our topics of the evening, the verbs of art, not the nouns of art. Do you use the verbs of art? It may be an unfamiliar term. I hope it's a little less unfamiliar at the end of our time. And let's give it a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And how do we stand on the verbs? All right. So we've got half our people who are not sure what the heck I'm talking about. Good. I'm glad there's some area I can add some new ideas to. Beautiful. Thank you all for doing that. Part of what we're doing, or what's necessary to do, is we're redefining art a little bit tonight. There's a story I'd like to start with. I tell it as often as possible because it comes from my worst moment as a professional. I was being interviewed live on television in a morning talk show. So it was a peppy young lady. And we got near the end and she said, Eric, we're near the end of the interview. Can you wrap this up for us by giving me a very quick and clear distinction between art and entertainment? I hope you groaned a little bit, because the misery that unfolded live on television was a shame to humankind. I had no idea. And this blather just kept pouring out of my mouth for 2 minutes on live television. Actually, what did happen was, sometimes when you're in a disaster, you just grab something and go with it, even if it isn't very good. Well, the one thing that went through my head that I thought, let me grab, I'd once heard someone say, if you're ever dying on live television, just don't stop talking, because then they can't turn it into little sound bites that will haunt you for the rest of your life. So unbroken, meaningless sentences pouring out of my mouth for those 2 excruciating minutes. And after this session, I thought I better get my answer to that question together. And here's what I came up with that lies close to the bedrock of what we're looking at tonight. And it's this, that entertainment, and please, Lord, let it not be opposed to art, entertainment happens within what we already know. Whatever our reaction of laughing or getting excited or scared, underneath that, entertainment says, yes, the world is the way you think it is. And that feels great. My goodness, highly skilled people going to extraordinary lengths to affirm my sense of the way the world is. I'll pay big money for that. And art, on the other hand, happens outside of what we already know. Inherent in the artistic experience is the capacity to expand our sense of the way the world is or might be. That's where the art lies, not in the noun, in the verb, that amazing human capacity to expand our sense of the possible. Teaching artists are dedicated to that. The number one job of an artist is to make worlds. They're doing that at the Hermitage all day, every day, making these extraordinary worlds, preparing them to offer to the world. And the number one job of a teaching artist is to activate the artistry of other people. And once that enormous human force is awakened, it can be channeled in many different directions, one of which is it can be channeled to help people enter those worlds and find meaning, find things that matter to them. teaching artistry can take that 94% of Americans that have a mixed relationship with getting inside those nouns of art and open wide the possibility that they can make a personally relevant connection inside the artwork. That's the act of consequence. That's what brings people back. And there is this set of tools that teaching artists use to accomplish that. And now it's time for our activity to test it out. So we're going to do a simple exercise. I am going to perform a live work of art twice. The first time, I'm going to do it the way it's usually done in the world, which is it just dropped into your unsuspecting evening. You have whatever experience you have of it, and then it's over. And when it's over, I want you to jot some quick notes on that paper. It works better if you actually write stuff down. Write some notes about what honestly actually happened inside you. Real things. Did you think, can you remember what you felt? Jot it down so you don't forget it or change it later. Then I'm going to do a teaching artist preparation. We'll have the same artwork performed again. And after that, you'll write down what happened inside you again, and we'll see if there's any difference. If the intervention of a teaching artist can actually change the quality of your encounter with a work of art. Okay? So here we go. First time through. Be ready to take some notes about what you actually experienced in the listening. Sonnet number 29 by William Shakespeare. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to him, more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. Then my state, like to the lark, at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. So take some quick notes. Tell the truth about what actually happened in there as you attended. This isn't Be Nice to Eric week. Tell the truth. Including if you made a shopping list. And just one more little note. We tend to forget these things very quickly or revise them afterwards. Okay, we're going to go to the second part of the experiment. And if we were in a workshop now, I'd invite you to think about something I might be able to do in 3 minutes of preparation that might enhance the quality of your encounter with that artwork. And I'll bet I would hear things like this. This is what I hear. You could at least remind me what a sonnet is, or like, what's going on? Give me a little theatrical context so it isn't just like plopped in the middle of nowhere. Or because the language is challenging, you could like tip me off with a little bit of help on what some of those words mean. I might tell you a bit about sonnets in Shakespearean time. So there's a lot of information I might have been able to give you that would prepare you, you think, for a richer experience. That's our standard way of working. That's not the teaching artist's way of working. Let's try a teaching artist way. Again, you're going to need your piece of paper for notes afterwards. And I'm going to ask you 4 questions and ask you to write down your answer. That's our activity. Okay, first question. I am going to name a state of emotion. And would you write down what you might call it when it happens to you? I'll name this emotion everybody feels, and you give a title for what you might call it when it happens to you. So you're just writing down a title. And the state of emotion is when you're down in the dumps, when you're as low as you get. What might you call that state of mind? Give it a title and write it down. And here comes the second question. Would you jot down a couple of things you might find yourself doing at some point when you're down in the dumps that would give you evidence that you're in a really low place? Things you might find yourself doing that would make you go, whoa, I just ate a pint of ice cream. I must be down in the dumps. What are 2 things you might find yourself doing that would be evidence of being in a very low state? Jot those down. Okay, here comes the third question. This might be the hardest. Would you imagine for a moment you're in that low state of mind? What are 2 thoughts that might shoot through your head about other people? Things you might really think about other people when you're in a really low state. Jot down those thoughts. And if you're with someone, you can write them down in code. Okay. And the last question, here it comes. Would you write down something that could happen in your life or does happen in your life that lifts you right out of that low state? Something real, not like winning the Powerball lottery. Something real that happens in life that just lifts you right out of that low place. Jot down what that is. Beautiful. Thanks for doing that teaching artist activity with me. Now let's go to the performance number 2, and right afterwards, you're going to jot down some quick notes for yourself about your experience during this listening. Here we go. Sonnet number 29 by William Shakespeare. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. Then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Quick notes. What was your experience this time? Okay, we'll put an official end to our arts activity, and I'm going to presume to talk about it a little bit. And we will have a little Q&A, Andy reminds us, afterwards, so you can ask about this. If you feel like typing in something about the difference between the first hearing and the second hearing for you, feel free to put it in the chat box. But let me just point out that your first response, my hunch is you were probably grappling a little bit. It's like you're trying to orient yourself toward this heightened language. You're not able to really make much connection. It's not very satisfying. You're working hard and not getting much satisfaction for it. Look at the idiom, pay attention. We pay attention. It costs us something, and we pay it in expectation of an experiential return on that investment. And that one, probably for most of our listeners, wasn't a very good return on that investment. In fact, it might have pissed you off. It might have activated all those bad experiences from ninth grade English when you were forced to read Shakespeare plays you didn't like. In fact, I purposely picked a hard work of art because that 94% of Americans, when they hear a fancy word of the arts, when they hear Rossini and when they hear Tchaikovsky, they go, oh man, that's not for me. That's like, oh my gosh, I remember Shakespeare. They've got this knapsack of negativity that we have to work around or work through. And teaching artists, that's our work. I purposely wanted to take on a hard work of art that not everyone goes, yippee, sonnet. We don't do sonnets in the 21st century, this old-fashioned tight-assed art form. I wanted to see if we could take something hard, and then with that intervention, if it worked for you, and it doesn't always work for everybody, of course, the idea is that by doing the work of teaching artistry, and I'm going to name a few of the rules that we use or the guidelines that we use, we can actually crack open that work of art so you can go in there and start making personally relevant connections. Same work of art, teaching artist intervention turns from a confusion into a work of art in front of your eyes. That's our aspiration. And some of those tools that teaching artists use to do that, one is we call engagement before information. We don't tell you stuff about the work of art. We engage you as a colleague artist in the raw material of that artwork. That's what those 4 questions were. You were doing the work of an artist. That's what actors, we get paid for that. You know, call up our emotions, give them names, see how they move in us, and then bring that out. That's what I invited you to do. And as your artistry rose into that challenge, we could meet artist to artist in the sonnet. And that's why your experience changes. Another one of our rules of thumb is a high priority on personal relevance. Not a high priority on Shakespeare sonnet form or historical context. In fact, you notice I didn't tell you anything in that preparation. I didn't tell you about sonnets. I didn't help you with the language. And yet somehow all of that recalcitrance fell away to some degree because I invited you to bring your relevance, and you can start to become successful even though the language is challenging. One thing we do in teaching artistry is we tap everyone's innate artistic competence. That's in a country where most people feel they're artistically incompetent. Enter the teaching artist to come under that radar. I find there's a big change around age 9. Before age 9, kids are omnicompetent. Man, they can do anything. You know, draw a cow. Up to 9 years old, I'm going to draw a fantastic cow, belongs in the local museum or at least the refrigerator door, my cow. And then sometime around 9 years and 1 day, you say, draw a cow. And that kid says, nah, I don't do cows. I suck at cows. And one sense of artistic competence after another falls off the plate of most Americans. And teaching artists come in under the radar, activate their innate artistry competence, and then channel it to connect to a work of art, to accomplish many other tasks, which I'll talk about in a minute. You'll notice that I used reflective tools throughout. There was all these pauses for you to write, to think. John Dewey, my favorite philosopher, said it this clear: if we do not reflect on our experiences, we do not learn from them. Teaching artistry uses reflection to deepen your connection to works of art. In a belligerently anti-reflective culture, teaching artists are doing the remedial work that allows us to go deeper within ourselves, within the arts. And then finally, one rule of teaching artists, I call it the law of 80%. It's called a law to make it sound scary. The law of 80%. That 80% gives you the impression I've done some research. Well, I haven't, but the law of 80% is still true. And it is that 80% of what you teach is who you are. And teaching artists enter that room, be it a classroom or a workshop room at the Van Wezel or the beach outside the Hermitage. They enter as an artist. And the power of seeing as an artist and sharing that artist self that you have with your community teaches more about the verbs of art than any amount of good handouts or lecture demonstrations. Being the artist activates the artistry in others to come and join you as a colleague. So those are some of the tools of teaching artistry. And I'll talk very briefly before we can go to some questions about the field of teaching artistry at this time. It's sad to say that in the pandemic, as you know, the arts have been clobbered across America. And people who are the real experts on the arts industries identify that of all the different pieces of the arts field, teaching artists have been hit harder than any other sector of the arts field. There are many tens of thousands of teaching artists in the US. Some people guess 30,000. And they work in schools primarily, but increasingly, they work for other kinds of organizations. They work in healthcare. The fastest area of hiring is in creative aging, where teaching artists work with people in older living facilities or other locations to activate the artistry in age that is usually so taken for granted. In fact, there's new funding coming into creative aging all around the country. Teaching artists work in government. 11 New York City government agencies, departments within the government have hired teaching artists in residence. Los Angeles has teaching artists in residence. I'm working with a new one in Chattanooga right now to activate the artistry of people inside the government so they can accomplish their work more beautifully. Teaching artistry is this sleeping giant of the arts, because it can activate the power that all people have in that creative potency that is our birthright. Just one final note, teaching artistry is now becoming a worldwide field. I started the International Teaching Artist Conference, which has become the International Teaching Artist Collaborative, connecting. It's the first network of artists who work in countries all around the world, in communities and schools, without even knowing about one another, many of them never having heard the word teaching artist. starting to connect, starting to work on projects together, this global sleeping giant is beginning to wake. And that little experience we had around the sonnet, and if we got lucky and you actually could experience a taste of what just 3 minutes can do, I think you'll recognize how much it can do for education in the Sarasota area, education across the US, arts organizations like the Van Wezel that have relied on teaching artists for a very long time, and really this growing field that's hurting right now that has so much to offer: environmentalism and health and good governance, and really the future of a healthier society. So let me stop preaching at this point, Andy, and this may be a moment when we should take some questions.
Well, first, Eric, just have to say thank you on behalf of the Hermitage Artist Retreat and the Van Wezel Foundation for your time and your talent. One thing that you left out in speaking about the ecosystem of Sarasota and the arts education community here is that you have played a vital, vital role in making that ecosystem so much better. So thank you for your participation over the years with us. We're honored to have you involved with the Hermitage, and I know you've worked with the Van Wezel and many other organizations in town. So thank you for being an integral part of our community. Also, I just want to acknowledge how fortunate we all are to have you with us tonight. I mean, Eric, you're doing keynote speeches for major arts organizations and cultural institutions around the world, and we are just so blessed and fortunate to share you with our collective community tonight. So I will stop waxing poetic about you, but you were one of the first curators that I had the privilege to meet in my new job, and just have always been a joy to connect with, and tonight is blowing my mind, as you're seeing in the chat. And I know you've been busy talking, but you'll have a chance to catch up on some of the wonderful comments that everyone has been posting. Also, to give a shout out to the amazing teaching artists from the Van Wezel Foundation and the Hermitage teaching artists. Thank you all for being here. So for those of you who have not yet started entering questions, if you want to chat them there to the panelists and attendees, we will do our best to take on as many as we can. And thank you for the questions that have come in already. And then after we do our Q&A, for anyone who would like, we're going to keep the chat window open so that you can continue your conversation, and everyone can continue a little dialogue and saying nice things about Eric, or as he said, saying not nice things if you so dare. He can take it, but what is there not nice to say about you?
Andy, I got one right here from Nancy. I'm going to jump right on this question from Nancy, who's asking about age groups. To just say, one of the amazing things about teaching artists is the breadth of people they work with. I know teaching artists who work with pre-K. There's some teaching artists who are working prenatal. Senior creative aging is really the fastest growing part of the field. I have worked with the board of directors of Federal Express, with heavy duty business people, with scientists that take the techniques of teaching artistry with adaptation applied to any audience. And we target the goal, we can achieve the goal, and it's amazingly broad, even though the field remains so widely invisible.
Excellent. And actually, Eric, that piggybacks to another question that came up earlier. So you raised the point that, there's bad teaching artistry. Is that better or worse than no teaching artistry, particularly with kids of different ages?
I'm not sure I claim that there's bad teaching artistry, but there is. And part of the reason there is teaching artistry that is less developed is it's really, there aren't good pathways into this field. They're beginning to be some pathways, but artists who have a yen to work in direct participatory ways often have to find their own way in. Sometimes it's through a job, like with the Van Wezel, where there's professional development that lets you get better. But there are younger TAs, there's a whole lot more passion than there is opportunity to develop the skills of it. And I would say I've never really witnessed harmful teaching artistry. There may be teaching artistry that just isn't that effective. But again, if it's a true artistry that's in the room, there's some benefit from the law of 80%. And man, if there's one more thing I could do before I croak, it would be to actually build healthier pathways for this next generation of young artists that wants this work. Build more pathways in their training.
Eric, thank you for that. I also have to give a shout out to Brian Hirsch, who you know, since you referenced Any Given Child in Sarasota. Brian writes, thank you to Eric for blazing a trail for teaching artists and advocating for arts education. Thank you, Brian, for saying hello.
Hey,
And
Brian, thank you.
I have a question here from Christine. Why do you think that teachers shy away from exploring the emotion of art with children and teens?
Well, I mean, America certainly has a mixed relationship with art, and you can see that in the way it lives in schools. You know, it lives out there on the periphery. We're not so sure about it. We know it kind of is good for them. We want it for those kids who have develop a special interest, but this understanding of one's own artistry infusing everything you do and deepening learning wherever it is integrated into a classroom is not part of American thinking. So teachers, you know, they carry such heavy burdens of things they have to accomplish, that art, they get the message that it's kind of on the side and they treat it like it's kind of on the side. However, the research is pretty clear that when you have teaching artists working in partnership with teachers for creative arts integrated learning, boy, does academic achievement soar because student engagement gets so high. So it's been a long haul in teaching artistry to have schools begin to understand what the arts can provide other than a special track for the kids who happen to have a passion for it. I think it's the biggest experiment going on in education, in arts education in America today, this notion of partnering around arts integrated learning in multiple subject matters. And thank God for this young generation of teaching artists that is blazing trails to bring arts learning into partnership with math, with social studies, with writing, because the results are by research proven so strong.
Now, a question from Kelly at the Van Wezel, I believe. What skills do you think make the strongest teaching artist?
Yeah, beautiful. It's real. I think of it as an expansion of your natural artist skills. It's not like a little kit bag of tools you get so that you can handle a difficult class of 6th grade boys. It is this artist's impulse to find connection and to empathetically understand what your participants are going through. So when I look at taking someone who's an artist and inviting them into teaching artistry, the skills I'm most interested in is their remembering what it was like to experience art things for the first time, and the curiosity to go back into that place and co-learn, co-discover what it's like to make stuff you care about in maybe simpler forms, but to actually be a co-learner in an art form is the powerful way in. So much of the work is the unlearning of the pedagogical approaches you get when you're becoming an artist to relearn how to activate your own artistry in the wonder of beginning.
Excellent. Eric, I have to also give a shout out to Courtney J. Bodie, who is a wonderful teaching artist that you introduced us to, who is currently in residence at the Hermitage, who says that Eric is largely featured as part of required reading in my grad class at NYU, The Teaching Artist. So for anyone who hasn't read all of Eric's books, we highly encourage you to check them out. And hello, thank you, Courtney, for that.
Thank you, Courtney. Hi, nice to see you. And let me just ask of Sasha, in case all of our saying really wonderful things about teaching artistry has caught your interest, I have a couple of links to articles you can read that are posted free on my website. And Sasha's going to throw those links into the chat box so that you can, if you want to follow up, these are 3 different ways you can read a little bit more about teaching artistry.
Eric, will this answer this next question from Deb, which is, how can you find out more about the National Teaching Artist Registry?
Wow. Well, there's some places you can find out about teaching artistry. Go to the Teaching Artist Guild, where you can find out they actually have an asset map of teaching artists and teaching artist organizations across the US. If you go to my website, you will have more than a lifetime of reading about teaching artistry. And I'll bet through your local partners, if you're in Sarasota County, the Sarasota Arts Education Partnership, Any Given Child, they can turn you on to the networks of teaching artists that are around here. As I say, as a field, we're not particularly well organized, but it's getting better.
Great. We've probably got time for 2 or 3 more questions here. So here's one. How do you build trust in a space that feels uncomfortable or dealing with difficult topics to address?
Yeah, really good question. And often teaching artists are in the middle of sensitive topics. I know it from my own experience. This is partly where the law of 80% counts a lot, where you can actually be that vulnerable, open self and deal directly with what's happening. The way you build trust is by success, by actually accomplishing things together. So when I'm in a difficult situation, I will make a very small arts challenge for us to engage in together. And we will then build from there. Of course, you need to create, teaching artists tend to be quite good at creating conducive environments quickly, so that people can kind of slip into a little bit of courage, a little bit of themselves coming forward. And if you can guide that interaction so it feels successful, even if there's antipathy in the room, you then have something you can build on. And I'm just as one example, I'm working with teaching artists in the state of Vermont who are going to be facilitating conversations in towns across the state about racial and economic justice. And we're working on the training now, which is in the process of creating a mural. How do you get all the different voices of that community to make a statement about the future they want for justice in their community? And we're training teaching artists to lead those across the state.
Now, Eric, your poll questions earlier, you asked about, which of us are professional artists, which are not, how we define ourselves on that spectrum. Do you have to be a professional artist to be a teaching artist, is a question that's come up.
Beautiful question. I don't use the word artist much anymore, maybe in polls, because there's so many tripwires around institutions and historical understandings. The way I think of it and when I work with people outside of the arts who definitely think they're not artists, I think almost everyone will cop to the fact that they have artistry. And I am working to activate that artistry. And once it is activated, they maybe are going to channel it into creating 35 years of watercolor paintings, or they are maybe going to channel it into the best mothering that life can make for those kids. I don't know where your artistry is going, and I don't know whether that makes you an artist or not. A professional gets to make a living, I guess, mostly at it. Teaching artists make their living partly by their teaching artist money and partly by their artist money. And in the one research study done about teaching artists in the US, it confirmed that if you have both parts of that going, you can actually make enough money to pay your rent and you don't have to be a waiter on the side. So I actually find I use the term make stuff you care about more than I use the word art in my old age.
So Eric, I have one last question here that there's some great ones that we may or may not get to, but we will do our best to follow up and keep an eye on the chat later. But this one I thought was particularly important in light of what's going on here at the Hermitage and at the Van Wezel and throughout our community. Once established, how important is it for teaching artists to make time to continue feeding their own muse and practicing their art form regularly?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, whoever asked that question.
And I apologize, I didn't grab the name with that.
That's all right. You know, because you're onto something, whoever asked that. Teaching artists are too generous sometimes. They work themselves dry sometimes. And I mean, when you have colleagues, they will remind you. And when you have projects, you remember. But so often, just this passion to make a difference, the passion to make a difference in healthcare, to passion to make a difference to kids in schools, especially kids who need some support, is so strong. The impulse to give is so strong that we do sometimes work ourselves dry. You mentioned Courtney before. My goodness, that woman works, I don't know how many hours a day to build this field of teaching artistry and to share it out with others. So thank you for the reminder. There are places, very few in the world, but like the Hermitage Artist Retreat, where Courtney gets to revive her artistry in this time. And when teaching artists can draw together, like in the Arts Education Partnership in Sarasota, that's what they do for each other. They talk artist to artist, remember that they're artists, find projects together to keep that artistry going. And I can speak for my own life and my 70 hours of week of work. If I can have 2 hours of art making in the morning, then the rest of the day, I can put in 12 or 14 hours after that. If I've been in my artistic flow before 6 a.m., I'm good to go till 9 p.m. So it is that power of artistry in us that keeps us going. And thank you for reminding us that we need to take care of ourselves, because sometimes we don't.
And that was a question from Lisa. So thank you, Lisa, for that wonderful question. And I've had the privilege of witnessing that experience with Eric, Courtney, and so many other brilliant teaching artists in our community, and just how they kind of feed each other's souls and each other's energy to put in those 70, 80-hour longer weeks. It's really a 24/7 job. So as they say, those who can teach, those who really can are teaching artists. So thank you to all of you for contributing to really just this important artistic and cultural ecosystem that we're all privileged to be part of. And thanks to all of you for being here tonight. We are just honored that you could be here and share your evening with us, and to Eric for sharing his time and talent and knowledge and experience with us. And I could go on with that list of what you're giving us, Eric. I have to thank our partners in crime at the Van Wezel Foundation on behalf of the Hermitage Artist Retreat, on behalf of both organizations. We are so grateful to all of you out there for being supporters, partners, and wonderful artists and teaching artists in our community. So thank you. And to learn more about either organization and hear what we've got going on in the world of the arts and arts education, you can go to our respective websites, which will pop up in the scroll, and learn more. And Eric, just thank you again. We're going to leave this chat window open for those of you in attendance who want to keep chatting, saying hello to each other. If you recognize names, there is an option. If you're writing to just the panelists, you can click the pull down menu, write to panelists and all attendees to share your words with everyone in the room. We're thrilled to have an extraordinary attendance tonight, and just thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Eric, any final remarks you'd like to share before we sign off?
You know, I have this impulse to end with a little poetic phrase. This comes from a poem, Two Tramps in Mud Time by Robert Frost. And this is sort of a teaching artist credo, but yield who will to their separation. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation as my two eyes make one in sight. Only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes. Is the work ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes? Thank you all.
Eric, if everyone had their mics open, I know we'd all be applauding. So thank you. Have a great evening, everyone. We're going to sign off, but we'll leave your chat open. So we'll mute and sign off video. Thank you so much. Thanks, Eric.